Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. What happened to Jet Li? Do you remember that guy, Jet Li? Yeah? Right? The martial artist, film star. This guy, Jet Li. This is 1994, Fist of Legend, one of my favorite films. Now, if you don't know Jet Li, it might be a little bit of an older reference. Jet Li, he's one of the biggest martial artists and film stars in China. He was huge in China, gigantic. And he made a crossover to the US in about the year 2000. And Jet Li, for those who don't know, he's a master in the art of wushu, in the number of different disciplines within that. And when he came to the US, he was a sensation. So much so that the Wachowskis, they reached out to him, said, "We want you to be part of the Matrix in 2003." And what they said to him was, "We want to be part of it. We want you to be the Oracle's bodyguard." And so he sat down with the Wachowskis and discussed the project. But then he decided to pull out and not be part of it. And it's because the first 3 months of filming was to be on set to do all the filming. The remaining 6 months of the project was going to be him wearing a bodysuit, those motion capture bodysuits, and he's going to capture all of his wushu moves. And he said, "Actually, I've spent my life studying this art form, in this martial art, this ancient art form," and he didn't want that to be colonized and for it to become the IP of Warner Brothers. So he pulled out. He refused to be colonized. Now, when we talk about colonization and decolonizing data, it sounds like a very complex thing, very, very, very big topic. So what I'm going to do is talk about decolonizing data in 3 stories. So the first story that I'm going to talk about is the story of Muslim Pro. Boo! Everyone remember Muslim Pro, right? Yeah. So we're all laughing, booing. With Muslim Pro. So if you don't remember who they are, here we have some slides. The Parable of Muslim Pro, here we go, slides are up. If you don't know, hugely popular prayer app. It's a Qibla compass, prayer times, 160 million downloads, and they also apparently sold all of their data to the US military. I mean, that's nuts, right? I mean, look, in the corner there, do you all remember that? That's horrible, it's all over the news. But is that what really happened? Is that how it went down? It's not quite as simple as that. What happened was that Motherboard, part of Vice.com, did an investigation. And what they found is, when you actually use Muslim Pro, they did a map of the data, the flow of the data. But they found that when you use Muslim Pro, you give up some data just to use the app. That's personal data, app usage, social logins, your device identifiers, your location, because of course you need to know where you are to direct you to the Qibla, and your network. And that's just to use the app. Muslim Pro, being wildly successful, 160 million users, thought, well, this is a free app. We need to kind of sustain ourselves. We need to generate some revenue. So they engaged with a company called Xmode. They used their SDK, their software development kit, as a way to generate income. And what Xmode would do, they would take all the interaction data from Muslim Pro and give them between 2 and 6 cents per interaction. Muslim Pro thought, brilliant, we've got this revenue generation model now, and we can do more and more and more for the community. But what they failed to realize is the primary, secondary, and tertiary data markets that exist out there. And once you sell your data, you're no longer in control of that data. Xmode, being a data broker, one of their largest customers was the US military, and not just the US military, specifically the counter-terror agency of the US military. So they all of a sudden had this data of Muslims, where they are, how often they pray, where they are in the world, that kind of thing. It's terrifying, actually. That's why the big outcry happened. So the question is, well, okay, that's terrifying, but surely anonymous data is okay, right? Anonymous data is the way to go. Well, that brings to the second story, a taxi ride to the mosque. Back in 2013, a researcher did a Freedom of Information request of the New York taxi company, the New York Taxi Municipality, And as part of the Freedom of Information request, they got back 14 million rows of data, journeys. And in that, you've got pickup times, drop-off times, passenger count, lats, longs, that kind of information. And what you can see on the screen is that data visualized. And that data tells a story, because each one of those lines, each of those pixels is a taxi journey, and across the top is a timeline. Now you can see like a bit of a gap about 5 and 6 a.m. And what they found was that actually tells the story of the people ending the night shift and starting the morning shift. And again, later on in the day, 5 or 6 p.m., you see another bit of a gap there, and again, another shift change. So when you visualize data this way, it becomes quite interesting. We can actually tell stories through it. There's a separate Freedom of Information request about the medallion data, and that gives the first name, second name, and other details of the taxi drivers. And in that, they found the top 20 first names of the cab drivers in New York. 60% of them were Muslim names. So it's a huge percentage. But not only that, but the top 5 names are actually variations of the spelling Muhammad, right? So, no surprise there. A lot of taxi drivers are Muslim in New York. But when you take the first set of data and the second set of data, another researcher thought, hang on, if we kind of overlay more data on this, what other stories does the data tell us? So a third researcher took this data, thinking, okay, a high percentage of taxi drivers are Muslim. We've got the taxi driver journey information. Why don't we map the prayer times on top of that to see what other story, the other data, what the narrative that we can see? And it looks like this. Now, it's not very clear, so I've marked it out on the next slide. So here you can see there are trends in the data. You can see that there's a clear line for Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib. So all of a sudden you can start to see there's patterns in the data, and all of a sudden you can see of this anonymous set of data, which of those drivers are Muslim. Cool, right? No? I don't think so. I think it's pretty creepy. So it starts to get a little bit surveillance-y and a bit creepy, right? Because if you can get this with 2 sets of data and an open data set, what else can you find out from that data? What other questions can you answer? By augmenting those data sets together, you can start answering with a high degree of accuracy questions like, which are the most popular mosques for taxi drivers in New York? Give me the names of the taxi drivers who frequent certain mosques in New York. And these are very easily answered questions for a high degree of accuracy, based on augmenting these 3 anonymous data sets together and getting that data. So you can see how this seemingly anonymous data can be reverse engineered to surveil a community, which sounds terrifying, right? So what we can establish is the source of the data is also very, very important. The provenance of the data is extremely important. Which brings us to the last part, the last story, which is supply chains of oppression. Now, I'm going to need some audience participation for this last part, right? I want to see if you can guess images better than AI can. What do you see on the screen? Frog? No, it's a cat. Another one. What's that? No, they're grapes. How about this one? Palestine. A crowd of people standing around with a parking lot with kites. One more. According to Google, it's people sitting on top of a bench together. Now I've chosen 4 ridiculous examples to go through with you to explain either how AI can be completely wrong, or it can be stripped of nuance and context, and how dangerous that can be. So each of these examples, it's needed human intervention to correct the outputs. And that's exactly what OpenAI had to do in 2022 when they launched ChatGPT. Back in 2022, OpenAI, their profits were 200 million per year. And they suddenly find themselves in a bit of a crisis. We need to moderate the outputs from ChatGPT because it's racist, sexist, misogynistic, Islamophobic. So they need to urgently sort this problem out. They engaged another company in San Francisco called Sama, who in 2022 made $19 million in profit. And what they did, they employed workers in Kenya to look through some of the most horrendous images and text and content that went through ChatGPT and moderate all of that out so that us in the global north can use it happily and not see this awful stuff. And they paid them less than $2 per hour for that privilege. Now, Time.com, they did an expose of this, and when this came out, it sent shockwaves through the industry. And what Summit ended up doing is cutting their contract with OpenAI. They stopped working with them there's a reputation to save their reputation. But what they also did was sack those Kenyan workers. So those Kenyan workers were exploited, underpaid, traumatized, and now jobless. It doesn't get more colonial than that, right? And don't worry about OpenAI, because the next year, the revenue went up to 700%, $2 billion in revenue 2023. When we see practices like this, we need a vocabulary or a shorthand to describe what's going on, these extractive supply chains. A term that I like to use is blood data. Just like blood diamonds, when they're extracted unethically from the global south, they exploit workers in the global south. They're laundered through a supply chain. The data is laundered through the supply chain, and then they're sold at great value and great wealth in the global north. Now, a year after Jet Li rejected being part of the Matrix, he actually said yes to Sony computer games. This is his game, Rise to One, and that's him. That's a digitized Jet Li, the thing that he said he wouldn't do the year before. The difference this time was he did it on his terms. What they did, they weren't going to colonize his art form and the ancient craft of wushu. So much so, he actually created a documentary talking about the process that he followed. So when we, as innovators and designers, developers, etc., when we see these extractive, unethical practices, when we see data being sold and used to surveil minorities, when we see anonymized data being augmented and used to colonize people, and when we see extractive supply chains, we need to call it out. We need to engage on our own terms. We need to refuse that we be colonized ourselves, and we refuse to be a part of other people's colonization, because that is what Jet Li would do. Thank you.